Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan, and you might remember a while back I covered a Nostalgia fan-made concept. Well, the same creator has recently made one for Nippon with a full army roster, as you can see on screen right now. And this is kind of cool because fan concepts like this serve inspiration for the fan base to keep hyped up about possible futures, not only through mods, say for example, but maybe in the future in the form of DLC for Total War Warhammer 3, or Warhammer the Old World in its tabletop form, as I know a lot of people do want a tabletop Nepalese army. And this concept is actually pretty cool. You can see a decent amount of roster. It's pretty much what you expect more or less from a DLC, because it kind of ticks all the boxes for a possible race pack. So yeah, let's discuss, let's have some fun. Again, I have to remind you this is a fan concept, but yeah, it's kind of more or less what I imagine from a actual DLC. We're going to look at a possible lord choice here. This is an Oni, which they have dual weapons, but it does seem when mounted they'd also have access to a range weapon. So pretty cool, the idea of a dual weapon lord character, as those would be anti-infantry, you'd be able to do a lot of damage. I've actually been playing a bit with Loki of Felheart recently, and that is a character which is dual weapons. I've been able to get like hundreds of kills on the battlefield, with two possible man options too, which I love the exploration of this, either being a Kumenu, I'm probably mispronouncing that, and a Storm Dragon, which is kind of curious. Obviously, we know Storm Dragons do exist in lore. They're supposed to be fairly unique. And the concept here seems to be very similar to mixing up a traditional dragon with that of a Cathayan dragon, which I think works kind of well. We do know that in Japan, real-life mythology and so on, they do have like dragon mythology, so dragons would be expected in Nippon if we ever got them in DLC form. And it would be a shame if they just looked like the Cathayan dragons. Though I do have a theory that one of the missing dragon children did go off to Nippon to do his own thing. Aesthetic-wise, it's pretty much what we expect from Nippon. It does take from real-world historical representations and then twisting it into a more Warhammer style, so yeah, it looks great. Next we have the Tengu Blade Master, which is supposed to be really good fighters. Once again, they've got an affinity with the blue wind of magic, and the fact that they could fly would make them really good at sniping out other characters. Again, another Lord option. So far we've seen two Lord options, there's only two types, which I kind of like. I think it's quite varied. It would be nice to get a human though, considering that Nippon is supposed to be a human nation, but overall it's pretty decent variety. I mean, it feels a little bit better than, say, for example, Cathay at the moment. If you're wondering where's the magic, that would be placed with the Oni themselves, which would have access to the 8 Winds of Laws, and also they would have access to the Lore of High Magic. All the detailed stuff you can find regarding this would be in the description below. You can actually find a link to the world building project, the World Anvil project, which goes into proper detail regarding of the artist's inspiration on all the units. It is important to note that obviously the Tengu would have access to the Blue Wind, which is the Lore of Heavens, such as this hero type, the Tengu Skymaster. So a flying spellcaster is always going to be quite strong. I imagine that the Tengu themselves would be quite good at melee also, so having, say for example, the Skymaster flying around, casting and then going into melee to rip stuff apart, it's got the nails for that, that's for sure, would likely make it one of the best spellcasters of the Lore of Heavens as possible. I honestly kind of like the design. I love the wing aspects and so on. It's kind of what a lot of people are expecting also from the Onyx Crowmen for Cathay, obviously with a different design, but we can expect some Cathayan stuff and Nipponese stuff being very similar, I'm imagining. Next, and a rather interesting hero choice would be a Kitsune with either the Lore of Fire or the Lore of Shadow Magic. So depending on their fur colors, depending on the lore that they'd have access to, I kind of like the idea of this, possibly instead as bound spells and make this like a really fast moving monster support creature with some other buffs too. The only reason I'm thinking about it this way is because bound spells are kind of a good way not to have a full lore of magic, and having too many magical things will make you a bit too strong. Yes, I know that sounds kind of silly, but I do like the idea of a support monster more than I do a full lore of magic monster, especially since this is supposed to be quite large, especially when we see the size comparison, so it's the best of both worlds in a way. Especially when the concept introduces other laws of magic, for example, the Yoki Onna. Again, I am likely mispronouncing everything here, so I do apologize. This is supposed to be another yokai type creature, which a lot of yokai are obviously featuring in this army list. but they have access to the lore of ice magic. So I'm imagining they'd have ice magic or tempest, or maybe even both, maybe even a mix of the lores. So it gives you some reason to use some magic that really is only found in Kislev in some cases. You never know how official canon would be pushed further into other places. But when it comes to unique lores like this, it should be expanded into other areas where it does make sense, so I like the idea of this. And then finally, for a hero choice, the Shinobi Assassin. And, well, it's an assassin, there doesn't really need to be much explaining, but it's a ninja type character, a little bit of range, and obviously very good at melee. It's something that, if we do get in the future a proper Nippon faction officially released, well, ninjas are kind of expected because it's something that's already featured in lore. There was a tabletop miniature way back in the day in 3rd edition, I believe. There's no reason to get rid of that, and the little assassin type characters that we do already have in Total War Warhammer, such as, for example, the Eshin Assassin, would take inspiration from this, and yeah, assassin characters are cool. Any assassin character is good for taking out other characters. You kind of want them anyway because they're good at melee. Sometimes you just want a melee character. I know a lot of people gravitate more towards spellcasters, but this also helps. What I would also like is a samurai type character, not only for a hero choice, but also for a lord choice. But I do understand that there has to be limitations, and the creator of this fan concept is looking at things realistically. We don't get that many different lord and hero options when it comes to official DLC, so putting too many would be kind of redundant here for a fan concept too. So we're going into units now. We've got the Ashigaru here. These are kind of like peasant warriors. They'd have either long spears or arquebuses. I would also imagine that they'd have a standard katana wielder, because that means that you could have a basic melee troop variant. I kind of like the idea of this. At the end of the day, yes, the Ashigaru name is taken from history, but that was also the case for Nippon officially back in the day, so I feel like that should also be the same thing. Keep the stuff which obviously wasn't insensitive to make sure that the historical tie to 3rd edition kind of stays there, you know? Obviously, these wouldn't be the best units that you'd have available to you. These would probably be one of your worst, the lowest tier, but you'd be able to recruit them early on and have a variety of different weapons from the very beginning. I imagine that you'd probably get a longbow variant at tier 0 or tier 1, with the arquebuses maybe pushed to tier 1 or tier 2, depending on the arquebus's nature, because yeah, they wouldn't be the strongest shooting black powder weapon, but they'd still be fairly good because armor-piercing damage. Warrior monks are also kind of interesting. We can see here they've got access to glaives and obviously hand weapons too. I kind of like the concept. Obviously, these would be the orange Simca stuff that we know of from way back in the day. Just run with what they were called. Oh my god. Yeah, Vimto monks. It's kind of a lost pun here if you're not British, because we had a drink called Vimto, which was basically the inspiration for the name. But monks being with glaives would be kind of cool because they'd be quite fast moving. They'd be a great vanguard troop, I imagine, too. It'd be really cool if there was a variant with no weapons and then just actually fighting with martial arts, because that just kind of sounds awesome, doesn't it, though? Next would be some Ningen troops, so you could get these guys mounted or you could get them on foot. On foot, they'd have a huge two-handed sword. They'd be heavily armored, so yeah, kind of good unit to take out any other enemy troops. And mounted, they would have access to long spears. I'd imagine that they would also have access to the two-handed weapons on a mount too, because we've kind of been seeing that with knightly orders and lore and so on, so it's not really out of the question. It just depends on how it could work. Obviously, much better armored, much better able to hold off enemy damage. The horses themselves wouldn't be armored, so they would act more as a shock troop than anything else. But overall, I like the concept, I like the armor style, plus, you know, having the banners on the back. It's very Japan, right? It's something that we're used to from Shogun 2, for example, and something that I really hope goes to Nippon in the future, if we ever get Nippon in the future. So these guys are called Hina Hina Hunters, and I love the concept of this. So bows and spears being your ambushing type, skirmishing unit, poison arrows, anti-large. Yeah, this is a fast moving troop. I love the concept. I love the armor style too. So yeah, light armor, not the best to be at front line, but if you are seeing a giant coming at you and so on, these are likely the troops that you're going to want hunting down said dragon. We can see that the one in the middle has a sword though, a short sword at that, so maybe two variants, one with spear and one with sword could work, as that would mean that you could play around, because one of the biggest strengths of Warhammer Fantasy Tabletop, for example, was having loads of different weapon options, and I think something like that would work in Total War too. The more options, the better. It's something that CA kind of avoid for some reason. until people start asking for it. And that's why we have all those different variants with the Champions of Chaos DLC. Shinobi being assassin type units, and again, not out of the question considering that we have something with the Skaven, with the Night Runners and the Gutter Runners. So yeah, I could like this, a skirmishing troop being able to fire on the move, run around, but also do decent damage in melee. They've got the hook there, which is something that they use to climb walls. I mean, it's something that I'd love to see rather than using ladders, because I'm sick of the butt ladders, but you never know. Race packs are more expensive nowadays, we've seen that with the Chaos Dwarf, so it would be kind of cool if they put a little bit of the budget to make things kind of unique, right? Of course, this is, again, if we ever get this, but as a fan concept, I mean, it just makes me think of that. Kappa units are kind of cool, so very similar to Turtlemen from what I can see, or they are basically Turtlemen. They're apparently about the size of a child, and yeah, they're supposed to be skirmishing type troops, something very similar to the Chameleon Skinks, considering that we can see hand weapons and obviously the dart gun too, which I'm assuming would have poisons and so on. I don't know about you guys, but I quite like skirmishing troops in Total War Warhammer. Skirmishing troops in general are always quite fun, so I feel like this could be quite good to give a little bit of movement to Nippon. Plus, this would be something fairly unique, even though the concept has been used by the Lizardmen. It's important that if we do get more established human nations in the form of DLC, it should be done in such a way that something unique comes in to distinguish them from others. Even though the troops will look differently, a lot of the troops, like say for example in the Cafe faction, kind of play very similar to the Empire. That's the problem when you're playing as humans, right? Humans are going to be one and the same. So another yokai type troop, which is the Yurei, and the way that this works is kind of like the spirit hosts of Warhammer Fantasy for the vampire counts. So you'd have some ethereal troops that will be able to do a decent amount of damage. They'd be able to be a tar pit too, which would likely be their best strength. They'd be able to do a lot of damage without taking that much damage themselves, and then you'd be able to get in some charges from the flank and the rear, or cast some magic and do some damage over there. I really like the idea of this, because yeah, I mean, spirits are always kind of fun to use. The fact is that Spirit Host is still not in game for some reason, and I really hope we get them, but it also kind of makes sense for Nippon, and I kind of like this idea. I mean, it looks cool too, right? Make them the spirits of the peasants. I mean, that's the idea here. It's the souls of the peasants that haven't been able to pass through and are trapped in the physical realm. I mean, this is cool. Yeah, this is really, really interesting. So interestingly enough, the Tengu were also brought in as creatures, so you'd be able to use them as a unit rather than just a lord and hero choice. Makes them a little bit more common, less special, but also in a good way, because this allows you to be able to have a little bit of fun, because come on, let's be honest, flying troops, which would likely be a little bit larger than normal, counting as monstrous infantry, they would be great shock troopers. It's something that we've been able to see with, say, for example, the Doom Knights of Tzeentch, right? They do a lot of damage. They are some of the best flankers and charges that you have access to. Positioning being the key here. I kind of like this because, again, if you're going to have, say, for example, the Ninja, which is a hero choice, but also a unit choice, you might as well have some of the other stuff as hero choices and then also monster choices too. Naturally, these would have access to no magic, but instead have a variety of different weapons, and the idea is just to give them something different, right? Like maybe a bounce spell would work, but the main idea is just damage. So the samurai are represented here by extra Oni stuff, here with either short blades, long blades, or even having access to, well, can you call them flintlock pistols? I'm assuming it'd be more like a blunderbuss, but yeah, very similar to how the ogres currently work in obviously Warhammer 3 with the man-eaters, where they have access to a variety of different weapons. This also has some other weapon choices too, with some longbows and obviously big clubs. I kind of like the idea that would give you, what, 5 different variants. They're supposed to be very, very large. I'm not totally against this. I actually think it's kind of interesting in terms of concept. It'd have to be a lot of unit variants, though, kind of like the man-eaters. I mean, even the man-eaters don't have that many different types of variants, when they should really have more. Well, man-eaters should be a mixed unit rather than that, but let's not open that can of worms again. Oni Ronin are also a thing, so clubs and great bows, similar to Shatti to be honest. Again, very much like what I'm seeing. My only source of criticism for the army list, what I've seen so far, is the sheer lack of humans, because there's only so much that you can do with loads of monstrous infantry. It does become a bit of an issue when you're trying to take over walls and so on, so there should really be human Ronin and human samurai too, to kind of add in as the step right before, in a sense. I don't know, that's the way I'm seeing it. There's a lot of monsters here, which don't get me wrong, it's pretty cool, but a healthy mix of both I think would make the faction a lot more fun. Adding to that, we get the Kodama here, which is kind of like the Tree Men, or well, Treekin actually, which adds in a little bit more of a shock troop. Again, I guess that would synergize quite well with all the different types of Oni, but I'm not too sure if this unit is kind of needed. Everything else so far, kind of cool. I like this, because obviously you get that whole Japanese tree type of situation, but I don't know. Obviously as a yokai it makes a lot of sense, but the Oni are already here and they're probably going to serve for the same kind of work, so yeah. I'm trying to sound negative, just giving my honest thoughts regarding this. Everything so far I've quite liked, but hey, you can't like everything, right? Again, coming to the Oni, but this time mounted with great glaives or clubs. And I imagine these to be stupidly fast, which kind of scares me. They'd also have access to a great bow, apparently. Very similar, I guess, to the Mournfang cavalry, which would be just absolutely insane, but possibly faster. I imagine that the actual, I want to call them lions, would be faster than a actual Mournfang. Would be kind of cool, but again, it kind of points me back to samurai and horses would also be kind of interesting too. Either way, monstrous cavalry, always fun, depends on the actual person, but a legion aspect needs to be done here too. Kitsune monsters would also be a thing, which, yeah, I guess I'd have to correct what I said before, give the Law of Magic to the hero variant and give bound spells to the monster variant, as that would allow it to be kind of like how the demons are treated, with the greater demons being used as monsters and also lords. I like this, I like the design. I love foxes, I think they're really, really cool. The design of the Kitsune is just really, really fun. You can see here Law of Fire and stuff. It's very obvious of what law they represent, and yeah, I mean, cool, right? More monsters, more unique looking monsters is something that is desperately needed. Again, the whole human factions needed to be a little bit different. Not much to talk about artillery. We've got a cannon and a mangonel, which I guess is pretty much just a trebuchet. There is the rocket battery that needs to be implemented too, because that was actually a miniature way back in the day. The only problem is, well, Cafe kind of stole that. It's kind of annoying that, I guess, Creative Assembly, well, more Games Workshop here, kind of moved that around. But another rocket battery kind of makes sense. Maybe distinguish it a little bit. Rather than firing multiple rockets, it can fire a strong rocket. But the other stuff, yeah, it's perfectly fine. It's all basic siege equipment, which you'd expect a human to have access to. Funny enough, the cannon, since it doesn't really have wheels here, kind of looks like the Bretonnian Bombard from, I want to say 4th edition. God, I'm old. Next, we've got a Baku, which is supposed to be like an elephant cat or something. I don't know what this is in Japanese mythology. I'm not very well versed with mythology in the East. Well, in general, most mythology. But wow, this is super cool, and I love the idea of it. Big monstrous creature like that would just be freaking awesome to use, just to slam down onto loads of different enemies. Like, it's supposed to be massive. It's supposed to be larger than the mounted Oni. And I don't know, man. I just get really good vibes from a monster like this. This is unique. This is what I'm talking about. This is freaking awesome. All right, now we've got a Genbu, or Genbu. I'm not 100% too sure how to pronounce this, but it is a massive creature. This is basically a battle turtle, which is something that you'd expect from a Nippon faction. You get two different variants. You get the standard one, and then you get one with a cannon on top. And to that I say, hell yes. This is freaking incredible. So yeah, big monster, big turtles. I mean, everyone kind of likes that. Very interesting to see the tail like that. A big monstrous creature like that is just freaking amazing, and it just adds a lot more flavor. Faction that's going to have a lot of units. You'd expect the humans to be able to use these gigantic yokai to do a lot of damage. This is definitely my most favorite creature that I've seen, or the favorite thing in general that I've seen from this fan concept art. It's absolutely incredible. So the fan concept presents Storm Dragons as a mount option, but also as a monstrous option, which kind of makes sense, having some Storm Dragons there, which we know are not directly related to the Kafan Dragons. All dragons are related in one way, shape, or form, but these would be considered different. We know Storm Dragons are actually a thing in lore, so having this to be a mixture of both the classic Ulf-1 style dragons and the Kafan ones to present a new subculture, yeah, I kind of like it. I mean, it looks pretty badass. I mean, yeah, this is something that I would love to see as a miniature too. I would paint this. And then finally, the Yamata no Orochi. This is Cool. Yeah, very Dungeons and Dragons, as you can imagine. But it's supposed to represent the incarnate elemental of high magic. So all the different types of winds of magic represented in one gigantic serpentine form with multiple heads. It's kind of cool. Not gonna lie. Freaking cool. I kind of like the idea. It's very, very different. I mean, we know that all the elementals that we've seen so far from the incarnate elementals are more humanoid in a sense, so I kind of like the idea of being serpentine. I mean, these would have to be stupid rare, very similar to be recruited in a way like the Dreadsaurian. It feels a little bit far-fetched, but I kind of like it. I don't know. Like, it looks far off from Warhammer, but far enough that it kind of fits in Warhammer. So, yeah. I don't know. It's just very hard to kind of wrap my head around it. One part of me thinks, wow, this would be an incredible miniature. The other part of me would think, oh my god, this would be incredibly difficult to paint. Overall, I've liked what I've seen. My only real complaint is the fact that there's not really a lot of humans. There should be some samurai and stuff like that. A little bit more undead could be presented, but hell, that's something that we don't really know too much about. You see, back in the day, way back in the day, Games Workshop did have plans to do a Nippon versus Hobgoblin box. And this is like round about the time before I was born or a little bit after. So yeah, quite a while back. But there were rumors back then of like undead in Nippon, samurai undead and stuff like that. Vampires kind of taking over a little bit. Obviously, I don't expect everyone to know that because there's very little lore known about that. And the fact is that the creator, Graham Davis, well, the one who pitched the concept, I don't think the box ever passed concept phase. Yeah, like, that is something that was mentioned. It would be cool to see in the future. You never know. With Nippon kind of being in the rumors lately for Old World, it's something that could happen. Even then, I wouldn't expect Nippon until, like, a lot of years down the line. Either way, this fan concept really made me think of how a Nippon faction could actually work, both in Total War and Old World, which is something that I like to think about a lot with loads of factions, because new factions are always fun. It brings in players, it brings in more interest, external money for companies like CA that could really see this as a way to actually bring in more money for them. You know, more content is always the best way to go. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's discuss. I'll have a link to the Anvil, World Anvil page, so you can check out everything. Like, the guy has gone really thorough with his stats and everything included. I know I really haven't been covering a lot of Total War stuff lately. It's just I've been a little bit burnt out. A lot of Pharaoh and not enough Warhammer. Don't get me wrong, I like the idea of Pharaoh. It's just, until I'm able to play, I don't feel too hyped up about it, you know? But I'm happy to say that I'm back, even with just speculation stuff. I do feel more confident to get back into the Warhammer things. It's just, I needed the break. You know, it's a palate cleanser. It's always good. And I like covering all the lore. But anyways, with all that being said, guys, have a great day, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.